Welcome to my live. So, we're talking today really about these lies that you have been conditioned to believe about yourself. Now, a lot of times when you're in an abusive relationship, right, you can get conditioned to believe these things through devaluation and criticism and just covert emotional abuse, psychological abuse. And often you might have learned it before you ever got into an abusive relationship. There's a lot of patterns from our childhood that we are conditioned to believe things that we get told. And I think something that I have found really interesting that I learned about is projective identification, where when you are told something over and over again about yourself, it just starts to feel true. And so when you're in an abusive relationship, particularly if you're trauma bonded, and then all of this information is coming from someone that you love and trust, right? This is in a trauma bond, in these types of unhealthy relationships, there's always this deep attachment. And when you feel attached to someone and they're telling you things about yourself, it's easy to believe it. And I find that abusers are really good at this because on one hand, it might be like, you're dumb. And that is overtly mean. So you may or may not receive that. Often you still do. But it's sort of like, no, babe, it's just that like you don't get complex things, right? You're just not, I just understand this better than you. Do you see the difference in how that's framed to you? And it's almost sort of like, oh, I'm not trying to be insulting, or it's just the truth, right? Like, you're not that good at math. Tell me I'm wrong. And it's sort of like, well, I'm not good at math. But the point is not who's good at math. The point is to reinforce negative beliefs about yourself. And I want you to know that these things are lies, because you can have your self-worth, your self-esteem just destroyed in these relationships. And then you add in what comes from the outer world of like, you picked them and this is your fault and you should have known better. And all these things that you hear, you really start to feel destroyed and shattered. So I want to talk about what it is to rebuild self-worth. I went live last week. I was talking about it and I uploaded the recording to YouTube. For those that missed it, you can check that out as well. But I want to kind of go deeper in this, because one of the hardest parts about leaving someone is the aftermath, right? What happens after the abusive relationship? And now you're sitting here perhaps out, and this applies to people who are in or out, let me be clear, but you may find yourself out of the relationship and just feeling like, I'm not worthy of love. And I'm thinking of a particular client who expressed to me that her mother doesn't think she's worthy. Her father never thought she was worthy. Her brother always treated her badly. Her friends have treated her badly. And so obviously she's the problem, right? If everyone's treating her badly, if everyone's treating her like she's not worthy, then it's obviously clear that she's the problem. And I resonated so much with that, because that's that reinforcement of like, well, it must be true. What must be true? What's true is that people will take advantage of somebody who is kind, and people will take advantage of somebody who has been groomed and conditioned, particularly women, right? Groomed and conditioned to be a caretaker, to fawn when you're being abused or mistreated. And we perform for love. So these are lies that we get told. And it happens to men too, I realize, but that particular piece of like conditioned from birth to serve, men are not systematically created that way, let's say. Not to say that it never happens, but I want to talk about why these lies are just so easy to believe, right? You get told you're dumb, you're horrible, you're unworthy, nobody would want you. You get told this so often. How do you hold on to what's actually true for you? And, it isn't easy. Sorry, I've got all my notes up that I want to make sure that I hit. I want to hit certain points here with everyone. I want everyone to really have some solid takeaways about the way that we can register these things as true just through repetition, and maybe even some of our own internalized beliefs, right? But if peace and affection kind of only come when you agree to something that you don't want to do, it could even be something intimate, right? If you only get that feeling when you perform, whether it's sexual or in service of someone else, it just starts to feel like that's the only way that you can kind of get through what the relationship is, right? It's difficult, but I hope that people can kind of see that in the context of abuse, there's this conditioning, right? You agree with them and you are rewarded in some way. You disagree with them and you are punished in some way. And again, this can look so overt or so covert. It can be a punishment of like stonewalling you for a week that might feel very overt to you, or screaming at you or hitting you, but if it's sort of just general mistreatment, it's so consistent. So you just learn that if you go along with this and you don't talk back and you don't fight back and you don't stand up for yourself, then it starts to feel like, okay, I'm safer this way. So you are starting to wire this belief that safety equals compliance. And that isn't true, because it's actually not safe. You're staying in an unsafe situation, but it feels like that. Familiarity can feel like comfort even when it's horrible. So it might feel normal and bad all at the same time. And that's really tricky. But over time, you lose your own ability to trust yourself. You lose your ability to really believe your own instincts. That's long-term effects of gaslighting, right? You're dealing with someone who is like gaslighting you, using Darvo, controlling you. One thing that I realized, and had this like epiphany, in all honesty, that I responded really well to praise. I don't do well when you're insulting, but I do well with praise. And I almost feel like it was like a good girl sort of complex of like, oh, good girl, you're behaving the way that I like. And so you get a cookie, and a cookie would be attention, or a cookie would be the absence of abuse. We get groomed in some ways to not even need a reward that really actually feels like a true reward, but something where when you behave in the way that they want, you aren't being overtly mistreated. And that can feel like relief, right? It feels good. It feels so good if they just come home and they're not a complete a-hole today. It's so hard to see it, but how do you hold on to just the fact that you've been told something by your mother, by your partner, by whoever, your boss, that it doesn't make it true? It doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that you're not worthy just because your mother and your husband treated you badly. But that becomes that internalized belief. So you need to kind of be able to say to yourself, believing that I'm unworthy is a belief. Believing that I am worthy is also a belief. And both are subjective. And actually, who's in charge of your beliefs? Now, who might be in charge right now might not be the right person, but who's in charge? You. You are in charge. You control how you feel. You get to control who you let into your life. Now, if you already have the toxic person in your life, please know that I'm not saying you're choosing this and you can just choose to leave. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if you've left, you are now in a stage of your own power, and you get to decide what kinds of people you're going to have in your life. And something that my therapist once said to me that was excellent advice and excellent, awareness for me was that often your circle can get smaller when you're coming out of an abusive relationship, because you're getting healthier. If you're really doing the work, you're getting healthier. And the people around you, you start to be like, you guys aren't that healthy, right? You suddenly realize that your best friend is kind of toxic, or, your work friend, or your mom, or you start to learn a lot. And I teach this in lives every so often, and we go so much deeper in one-on-one coaching. And I have a upcoming group coaching program called Rise and Rebuild that I co-host with Dr. Peter Salerno. So we run that program every couple of months. It sells out every single time. We literally only have 2 spots left right now, but Rise and Rebuild is a 12-week group coaching program that's really focused on rebuilding your self-worth and really rebuilding your identity and who you are, knowing your boundaries, your values, like literally creating a new you. Because you've either been abused in this situation, or you've been abused your whole life, or in multiple relationships. And I want to help people see their own power, and that you have been disempowered by people, but that it is within you. 75% of women that leave those kinds of relationships don't make it. Well, I don't actually know that statistic is true. I mean, it's don't make it in the sense of what, but 75% of women end up, actually it's 80 something percent of women end up in a second abusive relationship, which is really, painful to face, because I think the question always becomes like, how do I never do that again? How do I never meet a man like this again? How do I never get into a relationship like this again? And, there's no foolproof way. There isn't like, okay, here's exactly what you can do. But I'll tell you what people miss. My subjective thoughts on how some women end up in multiple abusive relationships. And hi, I am one of these women. I've been in 2. Is that I had no idea that the first one was abusive. I actually realized it probably in like 2023. I was healing from the second one. And then I was like, I've only been in one abusive relationship. And then I kind of went like, I dated a professional football player who was actually incredibly abusive. But he didn't hit me, right? And he didn't call me names, but he made me feel like garbage and serially cheated on me and made me feel awful. And I felt like I couldn't leave. And sometimes I think back and I'm like, that might have been my first trauma bond. I'm not really sure. But we don't recognize how bad it is. We don't learn what we need to learn. And actually, it's not just learn that it was abusive. It's like, what are the belief systems within me that got me here? And this is why we're talking about the lies that you've been sold that are just not true. That you are unworthy, that you will die alone, that you will never find the one, that you are not smart enough, not good enough, that you're too fat, too skinny, too funny, too whatever, right? Because women are everything and they're nothing all at the same time, right? It's the friggin' catch-22 of being a woman, is that you're just wrong. Especially if you're dating a narcissist or married to one, right? You're just wrong. Just accept it. So when you're in that, this is the conditioning and the repetition and the gaslighting, all of it. It's so draining when you're in the relationship and you do lose yourself. You leave that. I used to look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, who are you? I am not. And this is cognitive dissonance. I am not the kind of woman that would be in an abusive relationship. That prevented me twice from seeing that I was in one. Because I would never. That's other people. Other people get into abusive relationships. I'm too smart. I would never let a man treat me like that. And we all say that. And many of us end up in abusive relationships. And I have a firm belief that some of that arrogance is actually what gets you into the abusive relationship in the first place, is you think it could never happen to you. Now, on the flip side, maybe you've had low self-worth and that's what got you into it because you really don't think you can do better. But I think that most women, and it's not all, but this is actually a statistical fact, that most women in abusive relationships don't struggle with low self-worth. Not when it starts. I mean, shit, when it ends. Yes, that's completely different, right? When the relationship ends, it's like shattered. I remember actually the first abusive ex, I remember being like, you've just broken me into a million pieces. And then you just pick me up and you're like, whew, like you're nothing. It was like, I didn't matter. I was so I couldn't believe how I was being treated, which led me into the most wonderful relationship that I have ever been in. I met a man and he was everything that guy wasn't. And that man was worse in abuse than anything I've ever known, but it started as the greatest thing I'd ever known, the best man I'd ever known, until he beat me, until he strangled me. And it's because, and I'm not blaming myself, but we approach ourselves with curiosity, not judgment, okay? What got me there was that I didn't recognize what was going on in the first one. Well, okay, what got me there? Beliefs that I have about men and relationships and myself, right? It's easy to say, why do we give our power over to someone like that? And I don't like the language that we give it. I actually, those really profound people on podcasts, and it makes these really great clips where you're like, you know what? We teach people how to treat us. No, we don't. I hate that phrase. I hate it so much because that's not fair. That puts everything on you. Some people are exploitative and manipulative and narcissistic, or straight up narcissists, who are very predatory and very calculating and good at that and seeking out people who are kind. We don't want to operate from a place of thinking everyone's out to get us. That's a really unsafe way to live. And we don't want to live like that, right? Like we literally don't. And hey, Danielle, I was wondering if you wanted to leave. I find it so offensive when people come into people's lives and start, you can't find any credentials. I find it interesting because you couldn't have looked for credentials, right? Because they're right on my website, right on the homepage. So you just need to like make one click and find it rather than come in and be insulting. So perhaps you can just, take a hike and go bother someone else. It's really offensive when people do that and try to interrupt. And I just always want to take a moment to give people that type of credit. Like you wanted to be seen, you wanted to say something. So there you go. I think that people who are experiencing this, right? You've got a variety of reasons that we end up in relationships like this. And so the belief that has been built in the relationship itself, that's huge. Now, we talk about the childhood roots, which can be different for everyone. But I know that for me, I was like, well, I was never abused as a child. So it's not like it was just a pattern. But the interesting thing is, define abuse, right? I wasn't abused. And interestingly, it's something like 62% of people that were traumatized as children and hurt, neglected as children do not grow up and get into abusive relationships necessarily, or even hurt people. So I really believe that when you are a child and you think, oh, I've had a pretty great childhood, because I would have said that too. And I'm not even saying I didn't have a great childhood, but like the small things, do you know what I mean? Like, stop crying. Go to your room. If you were throwing a fit, I was a fit thrower when I was a kid. And so I always believed as a kid that when you throw your fit, like you go to your room and you think about what you did. But meanwhile, like, what does a child go to their room and think about, right? Or a phrase that I am like allergic to at this point, which is, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Because what a child is hearing is something is wrong with you. And like, I don't know, you're too stupid to figure it out, but there's something inherently wrong with you. And so that internalizes, and that's part of the projective identification, right? That you feel this like, oh, something's wrong with me. Don't be dramatic. Stop crying. Boys will be boys. Just all these little things that made you feel like you were inconvenient. You were maybe a little bit neglected, or you had inconsistent parenting, or, all of these things. It's you internalize the messages. Someone in my daughter's life talks a lot about how she talks too much. I don't want her hearing that. I don't want her hearing that someone thinks she talks too much. I actually disagree. I don't think she talks too much, but it's ironic that my son talks more, and no one says that to him. But, these messages, you internalize it. So suddenly you learn, oh, I talk too much, and that's being fed to me as a negative thing. So I should talk less. So I should make myself smaller. So people are happier when I'm smaller. Okay. And then that becomes who you are. Do you imagine what world we could all live in if we could all be the people that we were meant to be? But you didn't become the person that you were meant to be. Many women don't even know who they are because you were never given the chance to know who you are. And now you have the chance. If you're out of this relationship already, you have the chance to build a life. And it's not that it takes millions of dollars and luck and all these things. I believe that we make our own destiny. I don't want to get too fluffy here. I'm very into the action of like, okay, so how? So I think it's so important to see ourselves and surround ourselves with the right mirrors, meaning the right people who mirror back to us the things that we love about ourselves, instead of like, oh, Lisa talks too much. I don't talk too much. If you think I talk too much, that's a you problem. See you later, right? But it's easy to say that when you've built the self-worth, but I definitely didn't feel that way when I was coming out of it. But children tend to blame themselves when they can't meet their parents' needs. And so if a parent is angry, a child will sort of almost automatically feel like, oh, what have I done to make my parent angry? And something as a parent that I think a lot about is, I will get angry at my kids. I'm a human being, right? I will get angry at my kids, and maybe I'll yell. And I'm not big into yelling, but thank you, 5 years of therapy. But I'm a human, and sometimes I yell. And I think the biggest piece of that is not that, oh, whatever, I yell, just deal with it. It's the repair that happens. And I have no recollection of repair with my parents when I was little. It's different when you're older, perhaps, if you're doing the healing work. But as a parent, if you scream at your child and then later you go, Mommy had big feelings. My kids are really young. Mommy had big feelings, like I shouldn't have yelled. And I remember the first time I apologized to my son, he was like, no, Mommy, I was making you angry. And I was like, no, you were doing something and I didn't like the behavior, and I could have asked you kindly, but instead I lost control. And you know what? That's me. I need to do better. I need more control. So it's not about you. And just know that even when I'm mad at you, I love you and I'm sorry. So to see the apology piece, to see the ownership and the trying, like that is huge. That matters so much to kids. I don't know about you. That was not true for me when I was a kid. And so you grow up and you believe that like you make people angry and that you can control other people's feelings if you just shapeshift yourself into a pretzel to fit in. And then you find yourself fawning when someone is treating you like garbage and when someone is abusive. That's the kind of stuff that primes you for abuse. I had a podcast episode in season 1 of Real Talk with Lisa Sonni, Relationships Uncensored, where I was talking with a trauma therapist, Logan Cooper, on TikTok. She's at Crooked Counselor Cooper. And we had such a great conversation about the kinds of childhoods that lead you into an abusive relationship when you're older. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. But I think as adults, we are drawn to what's familiar. And that's really what I'm talking about in this. Like, I felt conditioned to work to be seen and heard and shift myself and be different and be more this and less that and so on. And that's what led me into a relationship that primed me to be like, oh, this feels like home, even though it's like, actually, this feels like abuse. So that's really hard. That is wildly hard. But I want you to question, like, which self-doubts that I have, or what I believe about myself, what does that sound like to me? Whose voice is that? That's like suspiciously something I heard as a child, right? I was a child who was very, like, I was a mama's girl, and I was always like at her feet. And I think that I felt like a nuisance, which as a mother, like, I can appreciate that having a child, even when you love, like, hanging off you all the time. But if my memory is feeling like a nuisance, then it's sort of like, oh, okay, I'll be different. Okay, fine, I'll be smaller. And you sort of step back. So I want to sort of put that to you. Have any of the things that he said to you or says to you, does that remind you of something in your childhood? Does that remind you of something that you believed or were told? And can you recognize that as a belief? Because a belief is just something you believe right now, right? Some people believe the earth is flat, and some people have learned that it's not. So you have a belief, and new information can come in, and you can change your beliefs. You can rewire the way that you think. Self-worth is not something that is as difficult. Like, don't confuse. It's difficult when you don't have it, but it's not as difficult as I once thought. I used to look at women who had, these self-help coaches online, right? They selling you self-love. I don't believe it. They cry into their pillows at night. And I laugh now at that belief that I had, because I love myself. Like, I literally do. I really do. And I won't be treated badly. If you treat me badly, we're done. See ya. It's that easy, because I know my worth and I know my value, but I've done that work over years. And I would love to say that, anybody can just have that through magic, but it does take some time and it does take some effort. And that's really, we're teaching that a little bit here today. I teach that in way more depth in one-on-one coaching and in my upcoming group coaching program. It starts on August 26th, called Rise and Rebuild, but we do host that regularly. So you can check out any of the programs, but it's really for people who are out of an abusive relationship or a toxic relationship with a mom, with a husband, with whatever. And you want to know who you are and rebuild your identity and know exactly what your values are, know what your boundaries are, know how to execute that, and live that, not just have them and they don't work with narcissists, but how to really hold the consequences and feel like you deserve that. Build a future, build a whole life, get to know yourself, your identity, all that, even some of the roles that you've played in these abusive relationships, the caretaker, the peacekeeper, the martyr, whatever, and really unpacking all of that. So we get into such depth in Rise and Rebuild. So please check out that group coaching program. I co-host it with Dr. Peter Salerno, who is an amazing researcher and retired therapist and author, real expert on cluster B personality disorders. So please check him out, Dr. Peter Salerno. But so I want you to just sort of look at the childhood roots of some of these lies, because I want you to question that. And, someone just wrote in the comments, at age 46, I'm just starting to rebuild my self-worth and my identity. Better late than never, right? I think, I split when I was 37 from that last abusive relationship. And I probably wasn't until I was like 40, 39 and a half, 40 in that range where I was like, okay, like I actually need to start rebuilding my self-worth. So I don't think it's too late for anybody. I mean, I've got clients into their 70s. I once helped an 84-year-old woman leave her husband. It was the most amazing thing. I've helped women in their teens and I've helped women in their 80s and everything in between to help leave and help rebuild, right? I always see this as sort of two pieces, because you can get yourself out of the relationship and, to the point that I'm making, land yourself right in another one. What is the work that gets done to make sure that you don't end up in another abusive relationship? I can't teach you how to never meet another narcissist. People always want to know, how do I avoid that? Good luck. They're everywhere. But what you can do is not get into a deep relationship with them because you have a BS detector at the beginning of this relationship. And it's like, no, they called you names, and we don't make excuses, right? If somebody is going to call you names in the first like 6 months of knowing you, even once, that's their best foot forward. Do you get that? Like, what's next? And so it's hard because they're so great and it's just this one thing. But if your values are firmly in, I will not be in a relationship with someone who calls me names, that is your hard boundary, then that's it. And if you have self-worth, thank you, Love and Light, for saying this. If you have self-worth, it will repel them. Absolutely true. Somebody asked to see my nails. They're mine. I think it's a new Genesis color. I don't even know the name of it. Dr. Ramani is amazing. Everybody should be following Dr. Ramani. She's absolutely incredible. People can ask questions. Yes, I just want to invite everybody to feel most free, and I'll fit them in where I can. So really, we're talking about the lies, right, that you've been sold, and who sold them to you. Is it the abuser in your romantic partnership? Is it your mom, your dad, your whole life, everyone around you? So these lies really rewire you, and they make you second guess all of your own feelings. So you're sort of like, I am worthy. And then there's a voice that's like, no, you're not. And you don't trust yourself. You don't trust that these things are not true. You trust people who have no business being in your circle at all, in all honesty, right? But they shrink your identity. How many women abandon their hobbies? And I sort of made a joke last week, right, that our new hobby is like fawning over an abuser, but we don't know what our preferences are. I speak to women every day who are like, I don't even know what I like to eat. I don't know my favorite color. I don't know what kind of music I listen to. And I think about that a lot of like, who am I? You know, when people say like, oh, we love to go fishing. Do we? Do we love fishing, or does he love fishing? I'm just curious. We love Asian food. I like Asian food a lot. Love? It's not my favorite food. My favorite food is Italian food. Why do I say we? You know, there's a cuteness in the we, if it really is we, but I find that we take on some of what they want, what they like, what they need, because that's the safest choice. That's the safest choice, is just doing what you need to do to survive the relationship. And what abusers want is submission and compliance. They want power and control over you. And they hide it from other people, and they make your world as small as possible so that you don't have external resources and you don't have friends going, dude, for me, you know, like he's just being funny, or that's how he is, or like, what do you mean? Oh, sometimes he just calls me a B word. It's fine. It's not fine. It's not fine. Never. My current partner would never call me that. Never. But, and I wouldn't stay, to be honest with you. He would be my ex-partner very quickly. But these relationships, these lies, they silence your feelings. They shrink your identity. You don't know who you are. They become your inner voice. So it's hard then in a coaching capacity when I'm working with women to say, like, whose voice is that? And the answer is, it's your voice. When is it really? So we need to kind of do some work to take some steps back and go, like, does that sound familiar? Does that belief? Because it might not be you are repeating a verbatim sentence in your head that your mom used to say when you were a child, but maybe it's just a general belief that you need to be quiet, right? Like maybe it was she talks too much, which sort of translates to be quiet, but there's an assumption that you make in that. That's a belief. Instead of like, you think I talk too much, so you spend less time with that person, instead of you think I talk too much, so I now talk less, right? But you really like, I think, what might be helpful for people is to kind of sit down and maybe make a list of some of the lies that you believe about yourself and really like, who said that? And I'll give you a personal example because it's helpful. And I think that a lot of people can relate to this, but you're unlikable. That was something that I always felt. And I've got a million stories that I could tell and reasons why from my childhood through friendships and other things that just made me feel unlikable. And that carried with me. So when my abuser would say things like, you're just an acquired taste, like not everybody likes you. It just, I like you. That's fine. Just not everybody does. Or like, oh, there's always one person you don't get along with at every job you have, which is kind of normal to not like everybody, right? You're saying that every job I've had, one person I don't vibe with, one person in companies of like 50, 75, 100 people, one. And like he positioned it like, see, that's evidence of everywhere you go, someone doesn't like you. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, plenty of people didn't like him, right? But that was never the topic. I was the topic, but it was believable to me. He understood my core wound and mirrored that back to me. So it was very easy for me to be like, you're right. And then I found myself being a little self-deprecating and kind of referring to myself as an acquired taste, which is like, haha, you're supposed to laugh, right? Put the laugh track. Haha, I'm an acquired taste. Everyone's an acquired taste. Do you like everybody? Of course not. So why would everybody like you? It's normal. But when it's positioned to you like a problem, you believe it. So write that on paper. Write down like, I am unlikable. Whose lie is that? What happened there? Who made me feel that way? And there might be multiple people, but I want you to replace that with the truth, which is like, I am likable. Or like, if you're too sensitive, it's like, am I too sensitive or am I aware of feelings? Am I sensitive, which is not a bad thing. I think that the framework of positioning every quality about ourselves, and women are so trained to be self-deprecating more than men. I know men can experience this, but it is more women in worse ways because there's a whole systemic conditioning that happens. But I want you to repeat that truth. And it might sound like I'm saying like do affirmations, which are helpful. That said, there's, different schools of thought about affirmations in general. And I would say that, I heard someone say this once and it hit me hard. And I really appreciated the perspective that if it feels false to say, I am strong, you're at your weakest moment in your life or I am lovable, and you don't feel lovable at all because you've just been left or, someone just totally mistreated you and that just doesn't feel true. I want you to reflect back on a time, even a moment when you did feel lovable. And if it wasn't lovable, then it's likable. Think back to somebody that made you feel special, a teacher in grade 3, I don't care. Reflect back to a time when it felt true and help yourself let that land and feel true because you decide what's true about you. I am likable. And there are many people, especially men, who don't like me. Although I take men not liking me as an absolute compliment. I take it as like perfect. But when women don't like me, now I think, well, that's normal, right? Like you don't like everybody. Of course, if I like somebody, I wish they would like me as well. But, not everybody's going to like each other. And that's okay because I have friends and I have family and I am enough and I am valuable and I value me and I value my opinion. So that matters, right? Bradley, there's a man who I like. There's a man who I'm totally fine with. He likes me. That's good. Follow him if you don't. That's a man who talks about narcissistic abuse as well. But these lies, like they just rewire you and they destroy you. Do you know what I mean? You need to not let these people destroy you and define you, because you define you. That's what I'm teaching right now. That's what I'm teaching in Rise and Rebuild. That's the group coaching program. It's 12 weeks. I co-host it with Dr. Peter Salerno. It's going to be amazing. So please check that out. It's in the link in my profile. But I think what's really hard is when you're healing from this, so many of us are doing it alone, right? We talk about our circles getting really small. Money can be really tight. Everybody's, charging for programs. I mean, and the program I'm talking about obviously costs money, but I go live and talk about this. I make videos and talk about this because I want people to feel like they have someone who gets them. And one thing that's really great about group programs is that you get a sense of community. So you feel like, oh my God, nobody gets it. Nobody's been through what I've been through. And you really will realize that that's not true at all. Now, I also co-host a club called the Toxic Free Relationship Club, and I've got memberships anywhere from $5 up to hundreds. But the two sort of primary groups of people is the $15 level community membership or the premier level for $75. But this is amazing community in a very active group of like-minded people who are really supportive and really engaged. So if you are feeling isolated or lonely, you may want to check out the Toxic Free Relationship Club as well. I'm going to look more into this person that you're talking about here. But I think, it is hard to do it alone because so much of this lives in your nervous system. And that's like, it's not just mental. There's so many, it's tied to fear, shame, survival. It's so difficult to pull yourself out. It always reminds me of that Tate McRae song. I think it's called Feels Like Shit. She talks about how hard it is. Like you think that when you leave the relationship, you're done with the hardest part and then you have to rebuild after. She talks about pulling herself out of his arms being the hardest part, but it isn't. And, it's hard, you do think that that is, the hardest part is getting out of the relationship. And I mean, we talk about leaving and how to leave and how to build up the strength to leave. And then you're like, okay, now you're just like a mess on the floor, broken and shattered. And I often say that I went from, crying in a pillow or a towel on the bathroom floor to like running a successful business and being happy and being in a new relationship and all of these things. And I say that to be aspirational, inspirational, because I believe that everyone can have the life that they want. And it doesn't have to include a new man. Don't get me wrong. Being alone is 1,000 times better than being with some trash man. You could swing your purse at Walmart and find a man. They're not hard to find. It's the least important thing in the world is a man's attention, a man's validation. Like who fucking cares? But what you think of you is the focus. And what you think of you is the piece that is missing in so many people. We need to focus on ourselves, decenter men, but decenter abusers, decenter the people that are hurting us. If your mom thinks that you're not enough, if your mom thinks you're annoying, we don't need to talk to her that often, if ever. I'm pro no contact when necessary, but you can limit that kind of thing. And you need to find a way, which I teach. It's not just, find it. You need to learn how to say, I'm going to get off the phone now. That hurt my feelings. And I'm just going to get off the phone. Right? A troll. Women need men. Men are so desperate for attention. You guys are so cute. Oh my God, you're so cute. You need attention so badly, right? Who made the phone? Who made the internet? Oh my God, a woman made the internet. But anyways, moving on. I always find it so ironic with men, how fucking stupid you have to be to say stupid shit like that. Like imagine oppressing in a group of people, an entire group of people from having jobs and having bank accounts and doing anything. You've literally created an environment where they can't because you've taken it from them. And then you take credit for doing everything that you never let anyone else do. But what's cute, what's special, what I love the most about 2025 is watching the way that women surpass men in education and just like everything. And men are so bent out of shape about it that they're like, I don't know why we can't get jobs. I forget the percentage, but it was an article that I read recently about men who are being men with bachelor's degrees are more likely to be unemployed than women with bachelor's degrees. And, there's a lot of whatever reasons behind it, but it always makes me laugh because like the system was designed for your success and you're still failing. God damn. That's gotta hurt. That's gotta hurt. That probably drags you right into comment sections and troll people, huh? You see a happy woman and you're like, oh, I gotta remind her that a man invented something. It's cute though. You didn't invent a phone. You didn't invent the internet, right? Like, please, I'm going to take credit for other men's accomplishments. I've done fuck all with my life, but men, oh yeah. Anyways, talk to me in 100 years when women, surpass in even more cases. It's funny because this is, it's interesting too, because like even the comments, right, of like males did, men have invented everything. That feeling of like that desperation to stay at the top and the fear that they have to have equality, because men and women aren't equal. Women are generally superior, generally, right? I'm not saying every woman versus every man, but we're proving it. And that's why they wanted to keep us low. Comments like that, men like that, right? They enable abuse when people are like, it's just a joke, or like, it's just a troll. I like to use men as examples, as educational examples for women, because if you were dating a guy who does something like that, or even says things like that guy, right? You know that he's an incel, a troll, a manosphere dude. You can recognize someone who's trying to bait you and upset you. And those are the red flags early on in relationships, right? That you're like, like a guy that will kind of neg you, that'll just like, it's just a comment, right? Like, oh, who invented the phone? Like that's a guy you want to block immediately. I mean, it's a guy that I want to use publicly and hopefully some level of humiliation. He's probably not smart enough to be humiliated as he should be, but you have to use that, right? You have to use it as a real life example, because we talk in like all these, oh, men like this. No, men like that. That man right there in the comment section, right? Like, let's use that as an example of a very hurt man who is a misogynist, who hates women, because that's what they sound like. And those are the men that are just not lonely enough. But those are the men that if you are not strong enough in your values and know your worth, you'll believe that it's just a joke. You'll believe that, you can't do better than a man like that. Or men like him will also often try to convince you that like all men are like that. And it's always ironic, right? Because not all men, but they want you to believe that all men are like that, so that you lower the bar and you want a man and you're like, okay, well, to be with a man, I guess you have to put up with, right? But you don't, because as much as they joke about like, oh, go die alone with your cats, you sound bitter. You sound so bitter that women think cats are better than men. Therapy is helpful, but therapy is only helpful if you go. So healing needs consistency, right? And I mean, these men are not healing. They're just trolling. And it is what it is, right? They'll never stop because they're miserable. So you have to cut off their air supply. And in many ways, I'm not doing that right now because I'm laughing at him specifically. But you have to learn your self-worth, your value, so that a man like that guy and a man like your ex or the man you're with now can't infiltrate your life, your space, your being, right? It's a beautiful thing to literally laugh in a man's face like that kind of man specifically, and really like belly laugh, like really mean it. Cause it's, we sort of like, fluff them off, but it's, this is a culture that we live in where it's appropriate for men to do that. And part of why I will very specifically call them out is it isn't appropriate to do that, right? And like, you can immediately see that guy's pathetic, but I don't think I would have recognized that 10 years ago, right? I would have been like, it's not a big deal, whatever, he's a troll. And, to a degree, there's some truth to the troll piece, but it's meant to distract from the conversation that I want to have with you. I'm talking about women building self-worth, and he's here like, blah, 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 in the corner, trying to distract women from doing the work that we need to do to heal, to get better. But that's the point. It's him, men like him that do that get in, and we're going to keep them out, right? We're going to keep them far out. And it's a beautiful thing to build this. Now, we can't just flip a switch and unlearn and stop believing the years of lies that we've been told, right? It makes it hard that it's just like not something we can switch off, but there are steps that you can take. And it's funny, I'm gonna reach for my copy here, but this is a book that I wrote a couple of years ago called Rebuilding After a Trauma Bond, a Self-Love Journal. So what's really great about this book is, especially for people who are like not into journaling, every day, 5 days a week for 12 weeks, 60 questions, it takes you through ways to rebuild and really focus inwardly. So you can get this on Amazon in any country that Amazon is available. And you can also get it in the link in my profile. It's the Amazon link. I have PDF copies as well, but Amazon's the place to get it. So Rebuilding After a Trauma Bond. You can also search by my name, which is Lisa Sonni, Sonni is my last name. But this is a journal that really helps people go through and start to rebuild self-love. And I'm just looking at the table of contents here, but exploration in that whole first section, recognizing your feelings, your inner self, your identity. The next chapter is embracing imperfections, where we talk about self-kindness, self-esteem. We reframe and refocus, because learning how to reframe some of the things we believe is key. And that's what week 6 is really about. Chapter 3 is your core values, your boundaries, self-worth, self-respect. And then in the final chapter, chapter 4, is building a future. And this is visualization, handling setbacks, and your support system. So that's Rebuilding After a Trauma Bond, a self-love journal. I've written 4 books, which are all right there. The first one is the Trauma Bond Recovery Journal. This one was the second, Rebuilding After a Trauma Bond. And then I completed a workbook called Surviving to Thriving that I co-authored with Dr. Carrie McAvoy. And then my 4th book is Narcissism Unmasked. And this one is really like, it's not a dictionary, but like a dictionary of all the terms, all the things, all the tactics, everything you could possibly need. And really like how we get into abuse, myths about abuse, the power and control wheel, why victims stay, all of this. So something to check out, any of those books, but the rebuilding one in particular, because choosing to rebuild your self-esteem, it starts with a choice that you want to do it. It's not a choice to have self-esteem instantly. It is something that you need to do ongoing, and something that I always felt was like, this is too hard, right? This is, you learn it as a child and you have it or you don't have it. But the truth is you can learn it as an adult. And I want to just even make this really easy, because we talk about, and I'm sort of stealing this. I think there's an account on TikTok called Self-Care with Lore or something like that. And she is like beyond the bubble baths. And I love that that's her sort of thing, because I swear to God, you put me in a bubble bath, I hate it. And I know that's really relaxing for some people in self-care, but self-care is self-love, but self-love is bigger than self-care. And marketing tells us that self-love is like getting a manicure and taking a bubble bath and, some alone time in the shower. Listen, self-love is hitting decline when your mom calls. And it's ending a bad relationship, and it's saying no to a project at work, and it's ignoring your kids one night because you'd rather sit on Netflix. It's allowing your kids to watch tablets at the dinner table for a specific night because you were just done today. Self-love is the things that you do for yourself to show yourself that you matter, to prove it to yourself. Those things, it's small things. It's a culmination of little decisions that we make every single day to just like, whoa, what do the kids feel like for dinner tonight? What do I feel like for dinner tonight? That's what do I want? When we are groomed and conditioned to put children before us and men before us and our mothers before us and everything, like, where are we on our list of priorities? Nobody's going to take care of you the way that you can take care of you. But if you are sold a lie your whole life and you feel like you are not worth being taken care of, you're going to get a man who loves to be served and not a man who loves to serve. Speaking of providers and protectors, right? What are they providing? They always see it as money, and most of them aren't providing that. But men can provide, good men who exist, right? Because not all men can provide care and nurturing and service and it becomes reciprocal, because one thing that I believe about women to be factually true is that we reciprocate. Women are so reciprocal and we mirror back what's given to us. And so if you have self-worth, you will attract a man with self-worth and you will be in a better relationship with that. But I would always like to preface that with, or I guess it's not preface, but I would love to just add that this isn't about, love yourself so that you can find a good man. Love yourself so that you can love yourself. That's it. This is really about you. This is about building the best version of you that never was allowed to exist because people in your life told you who they thought you were. And it never gave you the freedom to be loud and be free and be yourself and be funny and be creative and be ambitious. We're always made smaller. So we need to feel this way about ourselves. And it starts with the decision to learn. So being here today, talking about it, huge. Joining my one-on-one coaching or joining Rise and Rebuild, my group coaching program that I co-host with Dr. Peter Salerno, or this journal, Rebuilding After a Trauma Bond, a self-love journal. All of these things have mantras, have things that you say to yourself when you feel something. And even this, right? Somebody asks you something, could be something so simple. I'll give you the most ridiculously simple example. A friend is like, let's go for dinner Friday night. You free? Yeah, I'm free. Cool. Let's go for Mexican. And you don't feel like Mexican or you don't like Mexican food, whatever. Can you just say, hey, I'm not really feeling Mexican. What if we go for sushi? What if we go to that pub? What if and maybe you end up having Mexican food. That's not really where you land, isn't necessarily the point. Can you advocate for yourself? Can you just speak up in a safe way? Start with someone who is relatively safe, because that's the best way to practice. Because if you're nervous and you're practicing with like your abuser, you're not going to be met with anything good back. You need to have some corrective experiences with people. So try to do this with people that you have somewhat of faith in, and just practice asserting yourself. Just think, what do I want? What do I think? You have a new job offer and you're not sure if you should take it and you really want your mom's opinion. I get it. I would want my mom's opinion too, but do you want it? Really think about what you want, and then ask yourself, do you actually need someone else's opinion, and why? What do they offer you that you can't give yourself? These are things you want to be thinking about really in depth. And it's hard. I want to reiterate, I know this is hard. That's why it's a program. That's why this is something you have to teach over time. It's huge. You can rebuild. You can love yourself. You can value yourself. You can self-validate. You can emotionally regulate, all of these things. And if you feel like that's hard, or you're not sure if like you can do this, or you need more support, and again, I really urge you to consider either working with me one-on-one. I'm a certified coach. I have 7 certifications. I've authored 4 books. I've traveled internationally talking about these topics. And someone's asking a really good question. Why isn't therapy working for me? And I mean, hard to answer without context, but I think what I hear a lot, and something that Dr. Peter Salerno and I have talked about a lot, is why therapy doesn't necessarily work for some people. And like, what does that mean? What does work mean? A lot of therapists are not trained in domestic violence or abuse. Shockingly, some are not even trauma informed, but they don't necessarily know. I mean, there's crappy teachers, police officers, doctors, therapists, coaches. There are crappy people in every field. So sometimes it's not the right fit. Sometimes they actually don't have the skill set. I don't give a crap what their master's degree says or how many certifications they have. Some people are just not good at what they do. You have to find, therapy is key to find somebody who you really relate to. You need to have a good, secure attachment to a coach, a therapist, to really start to see results. But I actually urge people who are not feeling like therapy is getting you somewhere is to either switch therapists or switch to a coach and test that out, but somebody who is qualified, somebody who gets it and who understands. I have a great therapist, so I have a great experience in therapy, but I've had bad experiences in therapy, and it made me be like, well, therapy doesn't work. Therapy works if you have the right person. So if you don't feel like you are getting what you need from it. Now, this is hard, but I invite you to go to your therapist if it's not working and say to them, something about this, I don't feel like I'm getting the results that I want, and kind of maybe recap on what you want out of therapy. What are your goals? Because you can revisit that with your therapist at any time. Or if you feel like you've done that, quit. Quit therapy and get into a different therapist, because I'm pro therapy, but get in with someone who you relate to, who you feel good with, who you feel safe with, who you feel like you're getting results with. You know, I would honestly tell you, if I had a client that was like, I'm not getting results with you, I would absolutely either redo my plan with them or suggest that they see someone else, because I want you to feel like you're getting something out of this, right? Like that has to be. In fact, my group coaching program, Rise and Rebuild, has a money back guarantee. If you take the entire program, by the end of it, you're like, that wasn't what I thought it was, you can have your money back. That's how confident Dr. Peter Salerno and I are in this program, Rise and Rebuild. We also have another group coaching program called Trauma Bond Recovery Group Coaching. That's for people who are in or out of the relationship, but who are actively in a trauma bond. That one starts September 10th. And then we're also hosting an event in person, a workshop in San Diego in the Dana Point area called Unbreakable and Irreplaceable. And it's about rebuilding after a trauma bond as well. So it's much deeper work. But if you're in the California area or would travel to this event, the San Diego event is nearly sold out. It is phenomenal. I'm so excited for it. We've got 9 workshops. Dr. Salerno is doing an EMDR demonstration. There's a VIP experience and a standard experience. It's affordable. Like, please check out Unbreakable and Irreplaceable, but also look at Rise and Rebuild, that online group coaching program, because that one's obviously more affordable because it's online. So it's a little more cost effective for people, but please check it out. So thank you so much to everybody for being here. Please hit follow or subscribe if you aren't already. And I will see you again at the next live. Thanks so much.